This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
What's up, friends? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We have a 53-man roster. At least an initial 53-man roster. It'll probably change tomorrow and the next day. And of course, it'll change all throughout the season and into the future. But for right now, we have an initial 53-man roster. This is always a very exciting day. It's a very bittersweet day because there are 1,200 players who lost their jobs, and we want to be real and cognizant of that. These are real people with real emotions. I think it always serves us to be more empathetic of their situation. This is not Madden. This is not fantasy football. This is real life. And it always sucks that you see some of these players that, listen, I don't care what anyone thought of Royce Newman, what anyone thought of Anders Carlson, Sean Clifford, or anyone else that got released. They tried their best to carry that G, be a Green Bay Packer, and be the best version of themselves that they possibly could be. And in some cases, it didn't work out. And I still wish all of them the best of luck, whether that's in Green Bay or elsewhere. Last year at this time, Bo Melton, Kadeem Telfort, Aaron Mosby, Corey Ballantyne all got released at cutdown time. All four of them. Two of those people, Bo Melton and Corey Ballantyne, would go on to have a pretty significant impact on the 2023 season. And all four of them are now current members of the opening 53 in 2024. That's a great story for some of these players that I'm sure are disappointed, frustrated, mad, upset, etc. about being released from their job today. But this is just a part of the journey. And as I mentioned, I hope all of these guys find a way to land on their feet. And there are going to be 16 maybe-ish of these guys, maybe 17. Maybe they get a couple from other teams that sign on the practice squad, and will have opportunities similar to what Kadeem Telfort had to master or to better learn his craft and come back the next year and make a 53. That Bo Melton got to make a big impact at the end of last year. That Aaron Mosby got to, again, learn his craft, get better, and make a 53 in 2024. And that Corey Ballantyne got to start by mid last year and make a big impact as a starting corner and have, a significant impact through the remainder of the season last year. Like, those are the stories that can come from this. This is not the end journey for anyone that was released today. It is a piece of the journey. And hopefully, again, all of them go on to land on their feet and go on to bigger and better things, whether that's, again, with Green Bay or another team. But this is, as a fan, a very intriguing and interesting day. And we had, like I said, a lot of movement, a lot of intrigue, a lot of surprises. And I'm sure that's probably going to continue into Wednesday as Green Bay maybe looks to, well, of course, fill their practice squad, but maybe claim a player here or there, maybe change out kicker. We're going to have to kind of wait and see, and we'll go over all of that today. Before we get into position by position, just a reminder, Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube memberships. We are in the process right now of getting every one of our members signed up for the Pro Football Pick'em contest for 2024. It is a confidence pick'em pool. It is a ton of fun. And the winner, it is only open to Pack-A-Day members. The winner will get 2 tickets to a Packers game next season, or an equivalent prize if you can't make it to Green Bay, but hopefully 2 tickets to a home Packers game next year. So make sure that you become a member and then go on the community page on YouTube, get signed up for that Pick'em challenge. We've got over 400 members already. Not only do you get access to the Pick'em contest this year, but you get access to early videos, exclusive content, members only Q&As. It is all worth your time, so make sure to go and check those out. All right, let's start with quarterback, of course. Then we'll go again position by position and then break it down a little bit further after there. But let's start at quarterback. Jordan Love, Malik Willis. Malik Willis is technically pending physical, but you got to think that will probably take care of itself. Be a pretty crazy situation if he failed his physical and then they only had Love on the roster and then had to figure out something from there. They'd probably just bring back Sean Clifford, but that would be a nightmare scenario. But hopefully Malik Willis good to go, and he ends up taking that second quarterback spot on the roster. I'm not surprised that they went with 2. We'll get to Michael Pratt more in just a moment. When I put the initial 53 prediction together, I had just Pratt and Jordan Love. Obviously, the Pratt part was very clearly wrong, and they went with a veteran QB. Understandably, I don't know that completely navigates the concern that anyone had about, do you have a really good, consistent backup quarterback on your roster? That remains to be seen, but you certainly get somebody with some really fun upside that has a little bit more experience than either Clifford or Pratt got or had. And I think a player that certainly brings a fun element, an exciting element to the table, and can be a more dynamic player with the ball in his hands. I think that's always a fun aspect, especially when you're talking about a backup QB. So that part of it all makes sense. The other part of it is a little bit questionable. Now, of course, in order to keep two, you needed to release Michael Pratt and Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford, Bill Huber had reported the other day. That was not surprising. Michael Pratt, we weren't sure. And I put him on my 53-man roster prediction. And he doesn't even, obviously, not make the 53. But per Bill Huber, it sounds like he might be out of Green Bay altogether. Now, let me quote the first part of this. Quote, per Bill Huber, a source did not believe either quarterback would be claimed on waivers. While the plan obviously is for Willis to eventually serve as Jordan Love's backup, the Packers hope to bring back Clifford to the practice squad, a source said. And he would later go on in the article to say, quote, Pratt will be hoping to latch on to a practice squad somewhere else. That is a unbelievable change in dynamic here, at least from what my expectations were going in. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't think this is like some, oh my God, I can't believe Goody is doing this. They went out, got a different quarterback that they felt was better, really from a developmental standpoint or from a here and now standpoint, and Malik Willis that is better in both of those categories than either Clifford or Pratt were right now. So that's what they did, and that's understandable. The practice squad piece, though, is still really intriguing because I am still struggling as of right now to try to figure out exactly what it is that Sean Clifford has been doing better or is the reason why they are keeping him over Michael Pratt. Michael Pratt is younger. He has more talent, arm talent, upside, mobility, and he outplayed Sean Clifford in OTAs, training camp, preseason. I don't get it. And a part of me was almost in a weird way excited about Pratt that he didn't quite know everything yet because he was doing all right and he didn't even have the full knowledge of the playbook at his disposal. Imagine what it looks like when he does or did. I guess now we say did because it sounds like he's just going to be gone. That part of it is very perplexing to me. If we want to play devil's advocate, I think the feel here, for better or worse, is that Sean Clifford does have a much greater grasp of the offense. And Malik Willis may not have that the first couple weeks of the season. And they may need to call up Sean Clifford from the practice squad to make him active. He might end up being the backup quarterback through the first couple weeks of the season because he has the best knowledge of the playbook in case something does happen to Jordan where he can actually go in and run the offense for better or worse. I can at least see potentially the vision there, but it is still a bit interesting to me that that would be the direction that they go in. There is maybe an outside chance that they would keep both Pratt and Clifford on the practice squad. I don't see that happening. I think if I'm Michael Pratt and they go out and trade for a different quarterback and keep the other quarterback that I was competing against, I can probably find a better practice squad elsewhere that might be a little bit more welcoming than that. But yeah, I'm very, very surprised. That is, to me, one of the more surprising aspects of the entire cutdown day is that it seems like Michael Pratt is just going to be gone off the roster entirely. To go from a player who looked like he had some really fun upside coming out of college, showed those flashes in camp and preseason, thought he had a potential to be the number 2 QB, and then just is gone altogether, not even practice squad. That, to me, one of the more surprising aspects of the entire day. So now that the 53-man roster is set, I want to take a moment to, first of all, thank BetUS for sponsoring today's show, but I also want to go out to BetUS, and I kind of want to take a look at those Super Bowl odds. And here I am over on BetUS, 2025 NFL Super Bowl winner, Green Bay Packers, plus 1,800. It just feels right on the day that the roster is officially set for the first time. The 53 is in, that we are going to go out. We're going to put $100 on the Green Bay Packers to win the Super Bowl, to win $1,800, place my bets, and we are good to go. Packers win the Super Bowl. We get in for 100, win 1,800. I am excited. I cannot wait for the season. And if you want in on this action, it's easy. You go over to BetUS, and right now they are running an incredible promotion. 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Yes, 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Head over to BetUS, make sure to check it out and get your bets in today. All right, running back. This is one of those tough ones, right? Because let's start with AJ Dillon. Actually, he goes on IR, not designated to return. IR done for the year. Now, I'll just make this as brief as possible. This was the only outside of I guess keeping him on the roster, which if he's hurt, that's not going to be the case here. This was the only thing that they could do if they were not going to keep him on the roster or put him on IR designated to return. Meaning they couldn't release him. Okay, if you are hurt, you need an injury settlement. And there's no way that Goody's working through injury settlements on this crazy day where a million different things are going on. So you can't just release him. You can't waive him injured because he's a vested veteran. You can't waive him because he's a vested veteran. I mean, you could try to trade him, but he's hurt, so nobody's going to trade for him. So the only thing that you can do is put AJ Dillon on IR. And the only reason I bring that up is because we don't know at this point if this is, hey, he legitimately has a season-ending injury and that's it. It's over. It's done. There was nothing Green Bay could have done. Or if this was, yeah, he's actually going to be out 6 weeks, but we just weren't going to wait that long. We weren't going to put him on IR designated to return, and we were just going to move on anyway. So we're going to put him on IR now, and then we're going to work out an injury settlement, and he'll be free to sign with another team. I don't know which one of those it is. I'm not speculating. My guess is he was probably hurt for a significant period of time. The neck injury, you're just concerned for his long-term health. That's the biggest thing here. And I think that's the gut punch here, right? Is you feel for AJ. He came back to Green Bay on a minimum deal and basically a minimum deal. I know he gets that bonus for, with the roster exemption, but overall, he came back to Green Bay to be part of this team, took probably a pay cut, probably could have got more elsewhere, and then is not going to be able to play this year at all for the Packers. Maybe, again, if there's an injury settlement, he could play elsewhere, but it's just such a bummer for him. And again, the bigger thing is with double, neck injuries as of late, you just hope that he's okay and that this is not a career-ending thing, or hopefully it's not even a season-ending thing. Hopefully he's good to bounce back at some point this year for maybe another team. So a sucky aspect of the day when it comes down to AJ Dillon. And if we're being real, that very well could be the end of AJ Dillon's career in Green Bay, which is the worst way to possibly go, right? To end on an injury, go on IR, and then have to find a new team next year. And maybe he comes back on a 1-year vet minimum again, and Green Bay gives him another chance to earn a job in training camp. That could be the case. Or maybe he does have to end up going elsewhere. But this is obviously not the scenario that anyone wanted for AJ Dillon. And again, the biggest thing is hopefully he is okay and can get back to football for his sake sooner rather than later. The 3 people they keep, Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, and Emmanuel Wilson. The great news here is that Marshawn Lloyd did not have to go on IR designated to return. He is on the 53, which would tell you that they expect him to be healthy sometime in the first 4 weeks of the season. Hopefully sooner rather than later. In the meantime, my guess is Josh Jacobs is the 1. I know that. Emmanuel Wilson is the 2. And then Lloyd will have to kind of get brought back up to speed. They could look for a waiver claim here. They could absolutely probably bring some guys in the practice squad to call up, because if Lloyd is not ready for week 1, they will need to call up a running back off the roster. My one concern here, or off the practice squad to add to the roster, my one concern here is pass pro. Jacobs is fine at it. Marshawn Lloyd is not. Emmanuel Wilson is not. So they may need to go shopping for a practice squad running back who can maybe pick up the blitz a little bit better, so that if they need that, they could call it up. Patrick Taylor was so good at that. Patrick Taylor made the roster in San Francisco, so that's not an option. But either way, that could be something that they look for on the practice squad or for a waiver claim at the running back position. Meanwhile, Green Bay also released Ellis Merriweather and Nate McCrary at the running back spot. Wide receiver went mostly as expected, at least from what we talked about the other day. Dobbs, Watson, Reed, Wicks, Heath, and Melton are your 6 that made it. Grant Dubose, Samori Toure, Julian Hicks, Dimitri Stanley, Jalen Wayne, and Jalen Wayne, the last one, are all released. Now, first of all, Julian Hicks is expected back on the practice squad per Bill Huber. And then the next thing is, this was really between Grant Dubose and Malik Heath, it felt like the entire time. It didn't feel like any of the other receivers were really in the conversation, meaning Toure, Hicks, Stanley, or Wayne. It didn't feel like really any of the Dobbs, Watson, Reed, Wicks, and even Bo Melton were really at any risk. It just felt like this was a mano-a-mano Dubose versus Heath. And as I talked about the other day, this one to me actually separated in a very easy way for Malik Heath. I could have been wrong. I was definitely wrong about other things, but it just seemed clear to me that Heath was the better receiver. He actually showed, I thought, more upside over the last couple weeks. And Dubose struggled at times to get off of press, to get open. I loved him as a special teams player. At least he was good enough as a special teams player. I loved him as a blocker on the outside. He did all the dirty stuff, and hopefully Green Bay can get him back on the practice squad. I think that's going to be probably one of their priorities. I do not expect him to get claimed, by the way. I do expect him to be back on the practice squad in Green Bay. One thing I should note here too, and I kind of mentioned this with Michael Pratt, is this is not well, if you clear waivers, you have to go back to Green Bay's practice squad. Once you clear waivers, you're a free agent. You are not bound by Green Bay's practice squad. If any of these players would be like, actually, you know what? I would love to go to, Miami. Miami sounds nice, especially coming up in fall and winter. I'm going to go to Miami's practice squad. Like, they can go wherever they want. They are not bound to Green Bay, no matter if Green Bay spent a draft pick on them or whatever. Once you waive them, they clear waivers, they are free. And Green Bay can offer the practice squad spot, but some other team could as well, and they can decide which one they want. So, Grant Dubose does not have to come back to Green Bay. Even if he doesn't get claimed, he could go to a team elsewhere. And kind of, if I'm being honest here, if I'm Grant Dubose's agent, I'm going to kind of look at the roster and be like, well, Dobbs isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Watson's not. Reed's not. Wicks isn't. Like, they just kept Malik Heath and Bo Melton over me, and those two guys are still young. Like, am I going to have any real opportunity? Now, I do think the good news here is he's clearly the number 7 wide receiver. And if anything happens, he's the first guy to get called up. So my guess is he ends up back on the practice squad, but those are all interesting discussions as well. But just to kind of get back to the point, I thought Heath had very clearly outplayed Grant Dubose. I didn't think it ended up being that close in the end. Who knows if it was or wasn't, but they decided to keep Heath, and they're going to try, I'm sure, to get Dubose back on the practice squad. Tight end, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Ben Sims. This one also sort of went chalk. We kind of knew what to expect to some extent. Joel Wilson, Messiah Swinson, Henry Pearson, H-back, fullback / tight end. We all knew we're probably not going to be on the roster. The big question was Tyler Davis. How bad was the injury? Did Green Bay want him back? Like, that was the big question mark here. Unfortunately, it sounds like the injury was serious. He posted a picture of himself having surgery on Instagram. He is done for the year. He was placed on IR, not designated to return. So that's going to do it for Tyler Davis. Your 3 tight ends on the roster, Musgrave, Kraft, and Sims. This could be a position that they look to add a little bit to via waivers, or maybe even looking around for some other practice squad options at the position. Offensive line also in, as we talked about the other day. Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom, Jordan Morgan, Sean Ryan, Andre Dillard, Jacob Monk, Kadeem Telfort, and Travis Glover. Released, Royce Newman, Caleb Jones, Luke Tenuta, Lacita Smith, and Donovan Jennings. To me, this all felt right. Now, I will say one thing here. Travis Glover, I thought, would be one of those players that they would keep as kind of like a redshirt player. And I thought he showed enough upside. He kind of worked his way up the depth chart a little bit over the last couple weeks. And I thought he would be one of those guys. But I will say this. I thought between Michael Pratt, Kalen King, and Travis Glover, their last 3 draft picks, I thought King and Pratt had more upside. So I probably, if we're talking about redshirting players and keeping them on the roster, probably would have gone Kalen King or Michael Pratt before I would have gone Travis Glover. But I do think he's a worthy addition to this team. I do think he did show enough to be on the 53, and he will likely be a redshirt player this upcoming season. We know the starters: Jenkins, Myers, Walker, Tom, and then it's going to be either Sean Ryan or Jordan Morgan. I think there could be a rotation there at some point. I think it starts with Sean Ryan, and they'll get Jordan Morgan up to speed a little bit there. Dillard's not surprising. I talked about this on the chat, and I talked about this the other day. The hard part is if you release Andre Dillard, you might feel like you're okay for now, but I guarantee he probably ends up on another team, and it is impossible to find a player even the caliber of Andre Dillard in free agency during the season. So somebody else probably picks him up for that very reason, and you might not end up getting a chance to have a player like that for the remainder of the year until next year comes and free agency hits again. So that's why to me it makes sense to keep him on the roster. Jacob Monk was a no-brainer. Kadeem Telfort to me was also a no-brainer. I thought he came on really strong towards the end of camp. He was playing well, can play left tackle, right tackle, played guard in OTA and mini camps. He's got good versatility. He continues to improve. Thought he settled down a lot over the last couple weeks. That was a very clear keep for me, and that's what Green Bay ended up doing. So that ends up being the group. Yes, it's 10 deep. I don't mind that whatsoever, especially, again, because of the lack of offensive line play in the league, and developing guys like Jacob Monk, Kadeem Telford, Travis Glover will be huge for the Packers moving forward. Defensive end. This one was, to me, I did not see this coming. Offense, we did pretty well on, right? Defense was a little bit of a different story, starting with 6 defensive ends. I just talked the other day about how 4 defensive ends makes all the sense in the world. LVN, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Kingsley Enagbare, all 4 of them are going to take all of the defensive snaps. Brenton Cox, not a teams guy. There's not going to be any defensive end snaps really available to him. Aaron Mosby can play a little bit of teams, but there's not going to be any defensive end snaps available to him. Do you really need both of them back? That was a little bit of a surprise and a little bit of a shocker for me. But it is a premium position. And if they feel like they have something there with both of those guys, you can never have enough pass rushers. And I loved what Brenton Cox looked like in minicamp. I didn't think he did a great job of carrying it over into camp in preseason. He did have a really nice week 2 in preseason, but I was hoping for a little bit more from Brenton Cox. Aaron Mosby did everything he could to get his name in the conversation. Now the question for Cox and Mosby is, how can they make it onto a game day roster? Can they make it on to a game day roster? That's probably going to start with showing what they can do on special teams, and that should give Mosby a leg up to have a chance to make it as one of those players that is actually active on game day. Defensive tackle, we talked about, I said there were 2 positions I felt massively confident in, and they were defensive tackle and punter, and both of them, thankfully, stayed true to exactly what we expected. Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, and Colby Wooden. We did get one small surprise here, though. Jonathan Ford, we knew he was injured. I talked about it was likely going to be a waived injured situation. It was not a waived injured situation. They did put him on IR designated to return. He was the only player that got that designation. So while he will start the season on injured reserve, they will have the ability to bring him back if he does get healthy in 4 or more weeks. So that'll be one worth keeping an eye on down the road, and the only semi-surprise at defensive tackle. Linebacker, we'll talk about Christian Welch in a moment, but Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, actually, I'm so sorry. Let me go back to defensive tackle just really quick. James Esther, Spencer Waggy, and Keontae Shad were all released. A slight interesting note here, Spencer Waggy was not released injured, so they got out of the injury settlement there. He must have been ready to return. Linebacker again, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, Eric Wilson, Edgerrin Cooper, and Tyron Hopper released. Christian Welch, Christian Young, and Chris Russell. And then waived injured was Raylan Goforth. The Christian Welch one here is going to be the question, right? It was very obvious. Hopper, Cooper, Wilson, McDuffie, and Walker were all going to make the team. The question was, would Christian Welch make it or not? And I know some people are upset that he didn't. They liked what he did on the field in preseason. I will say this. I really like Christian Welch. Would have had zero issue whatsoever if he made the team. And maybe he still could. You know, you don't know what's going to happen and transpire over the next week. We saw before where sometimes Green Bay will release a player like Chris Barnes and then bring him back and he ends up starting week 1. So you never quite know with Green Bay, but my guess is he's just back on the practice squad. I think there's a couple things here that worked against Welch. One is he would have been a vested veteran, which means if he's on the roster week 1, his entire salary is guaranteed through the entire year. Green Bay probably didn't want to do that. It's possible that he gets back to the practice squad, and then starting week 2, when the contract will not guarantee anymore, then you can add him to the roster at that point and not have to guarantee that salary. So this could be something where week 1, he's got to be a practice squad guy, but maybe later he ends up becoming a active 53 guy. And you have to think he's going to be one of the first guys activated if Green Bay does suffer some injuries on the roster, especially due to his special teams prowess. But not super shocked that he didn't make the 53, mostly due to the contract thing, but also because I think they were probably very confident they could get him back on the practice squad. Nothing else was a major surprise there. I do feel for Welch because, again, he did everything in his power, but yeah, we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks once that roster situation kind of works its way out. Corner, 5 corners. I thought they would go with 6. Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Corey Ballantyne make the team, which means Robert Rochelle, Kalen King, and Gemmin Green were all released, and LJ Davis was waived injured. One small note here, Robert Rochelle was not waived injured, so that does give them the ability, if he does not get claimed, to go on the practice squad for Green Bay. That could be a big win, especially with only 5 corners on the roster right now. Kalen King, the surprise here. I really thought that Kalen King did enough to make the team. I thought, again, he showed the upside. There were some mistakes. There were some things that he definitely needs to do better, but I was overall pretty impressed, especially with what he did in the slot. Now, you look at 5 corners and be like, oh, they're really thin there. But remember, Javon Bullard can play in the slot as well. That gives you a little bit more flexibility. I think they're going to do some more big nickel. So you may not need 6 corners, and that could have been the ultimate decision of, hey, we have Javon Bullard. We don't need another potential rookie slot corner. Let's see if we can get him back on the practice squad. But I will say, I really thought Kalen King would be on the team, and that was one of the bigger surprises that Kalen King is not, in fact, on the 53-man roster. Not a deal breaker in any way, but definitely one that I expected to be there when all was said and done. Safety, Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Zane Anderson, and Quintana Oladapo released Anthony Johnson Jr. and Benny Sapp III. We talked about Zane being on the team. He's such a huge piece of the special teams and on so many different units. That one I could kind of see coming. Not to mention he had a pretty good camp, had that day where he had 3 interceptions in mini camp. It's been a really good process for Zane Anderson overall. Not surprised that he made the team. I am stunned that they released Anthony Johnson Jr., especially coming off the game that he had in this final week of preseason against the Ravens, I should say. He was physical. He was a tone setter. That was some of the best football I've seen him play. Now, it did look like he made a mistake in pass coverage that led to a touchdown. Asked Matt LaFleur about that. He said, 2 people jumped the route. There was a linebacker and a safety. The linebacker probably had the underneath. The safety probably had the over the top. Can't say that for sure, but those are the plays that, you have to be very wary of. And if Green Bay didn't trust him to kind of do the right thing at the right time, that could be why that took place. And if it comes down to special teams, then you have Zane Anderson, and Anderson makes it over Anthony Johnson Jr. Still surprised. I would have kept Anthony Johnson Jr., but before we freak out too much, let's see if Green Bay is actually able to get him back in the practice squad. And if they are, no harm, no foul. Doesn't really matter if he's on the practice squad or the 53. Just get him on the 70 in some capacity, and then you have access to him. But definitely did not see that one coming. Special teams, Daniel Whalen at punter, Matt Orzik at long snapper, Greg Joseph for now at kicker. I don't know what ultimately ends up happening at kicker if they go out and get somebody else, but I definitely did not expect Greg Joseph over Anders Carlson. Now, I have no issue with Green Bay releasing Anders Carlson. I think that was the right move to make overall, but they didn't necessarily have a plan B here, a great plan B at least. I think it might just be Greg Joseph. We'll see what's available. I'll go through some potential roster additions at that position in just a moment, but with the Friday night game coming up in, 9 days now, 10 days, you have to work with a new long snapper. You have to work with a new holder. I'm not sure they're going to go out and get another kicker and make that change at that point. They could. It's not impossible, but it might just be Greg Joseph. And like I said, the 32-yard miss for Carlson felt like a dagger. It felt like there may have not been any coming back from that, and it seems like there's no coming back from that. And I think that was just sort of the ultimate Anders Carlson experience, is just when maybe you were feeling that there was a little momentum to keeping Anders with a perfect condition day, with a good snap, with a 32-yarder chip shot, with kind of your career on the line, you couldn't make it. And that was just indicative of what we've seen from Anders Carlson. And it sucks. You spend a draft pick on him, you spend a couple years developing him, you hope that he can learn and grow and develop, and it just hasn't happened for Anders. And it's just too much inconsistency. Now, I don't know that they have a better option in Greg Joseph or elsewhere in the NFL to go out and sign somebody, but I can absolutely, again, understand why they wanted to go in a different direction. And if you're looking for the reason why, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it felt like from shorter distances, Greg Joseph was more consistent. From 45 and under, Joseph was more consistent. And that might be it. You might just be like, you know what? We don't know what we're going to get from Joseph, but we know more what we're going to get 45 and under and extra points. And if we can control that, we feel better about it. With Anders, he could be good from 60 and then miss from 32. And you just have no idea at any point what you're going to get. And I'll say this too, with Anders, even his makes would be like, that didn't look great at times. Like you would see that. With Joseph, when he made it, a lot of times he was drilling it right down the center. But on top of that, I will add, he's been on a bit of a slump as of late. Like if he would have ended the season strong, maybe he's at 78%, 79%, whatever it is, but ended the season strong preseason, I'd be like, yeah, go with the hot guy. But in this case, neither of these guys were kicking well towards the end. And just when you thought Carlson was, again, he misses that 32-yarder. So it's an interesting decision. I'm not sure that They have a great solution no matter what they do. But for now, it's Greg Joseph. And that was a slight surprise, certainly going into the day and ending the day. The biggest surprises for me, now that we've kind of gone through position by position, Anthony Johnson Jr., we'll see if he gets claimed or if he can get back on the practice squad. The 6 defensive ends, definitely only expected him to go 4, maybe 5. Kalen King, not getting added to the roster. Again, hopefully they just get him back on the practice squad. No Michael Pratt at all. I would have understood if he was a practice squad guy, but completely moving on if that is end up being the case. Yeah, I did not see that coming. And then Greg Joseph over Anders Carlson. I kind of mentioned, I'm like, I think in order for Joseph to beat Carlson, he was going to have to be significantly better. Apparently not, because from a percentage standpoint, Carlson was better, and Joseph, at least as of now, unless they sign somebody else, it is Greg Joseph who actually won the job. So again, biggest surprises, AJJ, 6 defensive ends, Kalen King, no Michael Pratt, and Greg Joseph beating out Anders Carlson. I will say this too. As of right now, don't panic and don't celebrate yet. Meaning, if you're really excited that Brenton Cox made the team or Aaron Mosby made the team, pump the brakes still a little bit, because waiver claims can come and some of those guys can still end up getting released. Zane Anderson, you don't know which player it could be if Green Bay does decide to pick up another player off of waivers or however they want to acquire him. So don't celebrate yet. The other thing is, too, don't get too disappointed yet. There are waiver claims. There are players who get added later in the week. There are a lot of different ways for these players to still end up on the practice. If you're upset that, Anthony Johnson Jr., Kalen King, Grant Dubose, Robert Rochelle got cut, they all could end up back in the practice squad. Christian Welch, same thing, and it may end up being much ado about nothing. So let's wait to see what happens on Wednesday before we get too in a tizzy over who's there, who's not, because there could end up being a scenario where all of their favorite 70 players are back on the roster in some capacity. No UDFA on the roster, the first time that has happened since 2004, at least not yet. Last year, they picked up Ben Sims as a UDFA off of waivers. They could find maybe another one this year, but if they don't, this will be the first season that they did not keep an undrafted free agent from that rookie class on the roster in going into week 1. It'll be since 2004 was the last time that happened. So a pretty incredible streak that could be coming to an end. Some possible waiver claims. I think there's 4 positions that make sense. Running back, especially if you can find somebody who can pass pro a little bit. Maybe somebody like a Deneric Prince. I'll be honest, I haven't watched him pass pro, but he's got the build for it. A tight end H-back, I went through and looked at the list. There was nobody that really stood out. The Texans had a couple players that maybe could be in that situation. I think Andrew Beck got cut. He could be somebody, but if they could find a tight end H-back sort of player, I think that could be somebody that Green Bay looks to claim. I will say Josiah DeGuara did get cut in Jacksonville. Don't see that happening, but they do have that position open. Kicker, Chad Ryland, Braden Narvison, Matthew Wright, Charlie Smith, Jude McAtmany, and Austin Seibert were all released. We'll see if they want to go with one of those kickers, or again, if they want to stick with Greg Joseph. And then long snapper. Don't know anything about any of these guys other than Zach Triner, who used to be in Packers camp and then went on to have a really nice long snapping career. But if they do feel like Matt Orzik is maybe not the answer, Cameron Lyons, Rex Sunghara, Scott Daly, Raiden Plattner, Blake Ferguson, Tucker Addington, and Zach Triner were all released as long snappers and could be available via waiver claim. We're trying to put together, or at least, piece together maybe some other players that they could be interested in. We know that Goody loves his top 30 visits. And when he falls in love with a player, sometimes he's going to take an eye, keep an eye on him and take a flyer at him at some point. Ben Sims was an example of that this past year, where he was a top 30 visit. Minnesota signed him as an undrafted free agent. They released him and waived him, and Green Bay claimed him off a waiver. So 3 players to keep an eye on. These were actually all from the 2023 top 30 visits. Jaquelin Roy, defensive tackle for the Vikings, who was just waived. Antonio Mafi, offensive lineman for the Patriots, who was having a really rough time, who was waived a couple days ago by the Patriots. And Evan Hull, running back for the Colts. If it's Mafi, that would be a practice squad addition in all likelihood. Hull or Roy could theoretically be claims, but if they do escape the confines of Indianapolis and Minnesota respectively, maybe Green Bay could take a look at either of those guys in the practice squad. But just a couple of names to keep an eye on, because they were top 30 visits back in 2023. I tried to piece together the best possible practice squad for the Packers, and here's what I kind of came up with. Now, I didn't put Michael Pratt on this because it seems like that's not going to be an option, that it's going to be Sean Clifford. For me, Pratt would be on, Clifford would not, but it is not me, and they do not care what I think. So here is what I think, assuming that Sean Clifford is on it. Here's what I think is the best one they can put together, not using outside players. Sean Clifford, Nate McCrary, Julian Hicks, Grant Dubose, Joel Wilson, Caleb Jones, Lacita Smith, Donovan Jennings, Keyshawn Banks, James Esther, or maybe a new defensive tackle there, Christian Welch, Chris Russell, Robert Rochelle, Kalen King, Anthony Johnson Jr., Benny Sapp, and then number 17 for Alex Hale. All right, that's kind of everything. We went position by position, biggest surprises, some possible claims, what the practice squad could look like. Wednesday's going to be another really intriguing day. At least a huge chunk of the practice squad is likely to get announced, and we will see if there's any waiver claims or any of the Packers players that they waived get claimed by other teams. It'll be another day of interesting movement around the NFL, and of course, we will have it covered here for you on the Pack-A-Day podcast 365 days a year. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Bradad, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Dan Miller, Alex Huang, Arnaldo Espinoza, Peter Ritaka, Caleb Cookster, SoCal Pack, Dan Guestford, and Love and Football. And of course, thank you again to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. If you'd like to sign up for BetUS, use the link in the description below. It's also pinned. And remember, please gamble responsibly. That's going to do it for me for now. I will see you guys tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.